welcome to Everyone's a Critic. This is Under the Influence with myself, Cassie Kinoshi. I'm an alto saxophonist and composer. I'm the band leader of SEED Ensemble, and I play with the afrobeat collective Kokoroko. So these are some of my favourite albums, some of my favourite influences that have inspired how I approach writing music and how I approach playing. The first one I wanted to mention was Maria Schneider's Concert in the Garden, which was released in 2004. So Maria Schneider is a composer, an American composer, and she has her own, I think it's 15-piece big band that features like some of the great American jazz players in the scene over there. And I really just love this album because it's got a magical experience to listen to, and then when you see it live, it really takes you on a journey. A lot of her music is very encapsulating and like puts you in a new world as you listen to it, and I've tried to sort of emulate that kind of theory of sound in some of my compositions. With Maria Schneider's Concert in the Garden, she is very influential to me just because there's not many large ensemble leaders who are female, and there's not many large ensemble composers that I know who are leading such a huge band in such a male-dominated industry. So as leading a 10-piece with SEED Ensemble, I found that quite inspiring to have someone to look up to in that sense. The next album is another big band album, and it features the NDR big band. I think it was released in 2001. It's South African pianist Abdul Ibrahim. A lot of his compositions, like, I just love the simplicity of how he writes, for simplicity combined with like obviously crazy harmonies and stuff like that, but I just really love the soul in a lot of his compositions. And how he approaches improvisation and just the interaction between the band and how he's written for it. And I'd like to move on to the third album that I was thinking of was Jibaro, which is by the Puerto Rican composer and alto sax player Miguel Zenon. So Miguel Zenon, everyone is obsessed with tenor players, but I think alto is like the best sax family. So he's one of my all-time favorite sax players and composers, and just the way he writes, and it fuses his music with his culture and his heritage, which is very important to me. So a lot of the stuff I write for SEED Ensemble, I try to fuse it with little bits of where I'm from, which is like West African and Caribbean culture. So just including some of the stories in the music that I write from that culture and heritage, and including the sounds as well from that part of my heritage. I think it's very important that a lot of the music that you do write does authentically encapsulate who you are as a person. And I think especially in the UK, it's nice to have that the opportunity to showcase music that does that. The next two albums that I chose were just ones that I liked and enjoyed listening to. So there's a French-English like pop band called Stereolab, and I'm really into Dots and Loops, I think it's called. It's released in 1997, and it's just something I enjoy listening to, just because like rhythmically there's so much interesting stuff going on, and I love that they sing in 2 languages as well, and it's just fun to listen to. But there's also a lot of composition that you can take from it when you're listening to it seriously at the same time. And then I thought I'd mention a recent album that I think it was released in March 2019, so this year, Clever Austin's new album, and I can't pronounce the title properly, Pareidolia, I think is you pronounce it, but I really love that just because the same kind of reason, like the rhythmic, the getting lost in sound, the combination of these amazing acoustic sounds with electronics and the improv that's there. And it's just really interesting to listen to, and it takes you on the whole album. I think the whole album is really beautiful. It takes you on an incredible journey, and it's something I've been listening to for like months on repeat. So yeah. So where are we? We are in Hertfordshire, in a park which is close by which is in the town that I grew up in, Welwyn Garden City, and it's kind of like just in the green belt outside of London, and it's where I grew up and where I was born, and so I thought it would make sense to just film here, because the greenery and the nature is kind of a part of who I am, I guess. So I thought it made more sense than filming like a lot of people like to sort of like film in like urban landscape and stuff, but like I'm not, even though I lived in London and I had to move back there, like this is a huge part of my really. And I found actually, I chose this place also because I found that growing up here, there's not anything to do here and it's pretty boring. So a lot of the reason why I love composition is because I'd use that as an escape or like a fantasy sort of world by writing all this music, writing songs, writing lyrics, all that kind of thing. So that's where we are. SEED Ensemble for me is my way of showcasing, like in a lot of the compositions I do write for SEED Ensemble, the Black British experience. So a lot of the music that I do write for SEED tends to focus on like political stuff that I'm feeling, the political climate of the UK and like my reaction to that. So whilst there's the political side of it, there's also obviously me just writing for enjoyment for the band too. But I try to pick players that I really enjoy playing with and really enjoy making music with, but also players that represent what London is. Even though I'm not from London, it's kind of my home because that's where I lived for so long and plan to move back to, and it's where my career is, it's where my friends are, it's where the people I consider like family are. And I think that often in jazz or in music there isn't a true representation of what that scene actually looks like. And my band, I feel, whilst everyone is great players in their own right, there's a mixture of races and a mixture of gender in the band, and I think it's quite nice to create with people from different walks of life, because it's perhaps more of an authentic experience of what London is and what London gives to you. So yeah, it's kind of a multidisciplinary kind of project where I'm hoping to work more with film, and I've worked with dancers and I've worked with poets. So on our latest release we've got Xana and Mr. Ekow, who are on 2 of the tracks there. And yeah, it's just, I guess, me presenting what my experience and the experience of my peers through the music for SEED. The name SEED comes from, when I chose the name, I thought maybe, I thought that it would represent like planting a seed of awareness. So a lot of the music that I have written for SEED, as I said, is about political things, and I'm not afraid of being quite outspoken about some of the ridiculous politics that we have in the UK and the ridiculous ideas that permeate our society. I wanted people, and I make a point actually at the all of the gigs I do of saying this composition is about this, and sometimes you see people like, oh my god, like uncomfortable, this is about oppression, and people are like, oh, like sorry, but like I like doing that. I like making people uncomfortable, and I like sort of presenting the real side of our society through music. I don't think I prefer any particular like write for the band or write for theatre or film or whatever, because it's just very different mediums. One thing I love about theatre is sitting down with the writer or director and hearing how they interpret the script. I've never heard people interpret writing in such a colourful, the way like musicians speak to each other about music. When you hear a director speak to you about script and what they want the music to do and use these weird metaphors that a musician wouldn't use, it's just really interesting because it gives you a new perspective of how to interpret the process of composition and improvisation and performance. Yeah, I wouldn't say I prefer it. It's just a very different kind of world. It was through playing with different people, but I kind of knew who I wanted to write for. And when I write compositions, I know who I want to play what, or who I'd like to solo on things. It's nice to change it up sometimes, but I always write for particular people in mind. Most of the band I met through either Tomorrow's Warriors at the South Bank Centre, or I studied composition at Trinity, but I was really good friends with the jazz people in the jazz course, so through the jazz course as well. I think so. Listening to jazz, my parents have a lot of jazz records, so I'd always hear it in the background. When they'd have people over, they'd always have jazz in the background, or when they're cooking, they'd have jazz and soul music in the back. There was always music in our house, not just jazz, soul music and funk music, afrobeat music, so music that's related to jazz as well. And then also my uncle, he plays jazz piano as well, so there was sort of that way in, and we'd always have like little jams here and there. So I guess that's how I started listening to it and playing it. I started on clarinet and then moved to sax. But I think I didn't start taking it more seriously until I got to London, and until I went to Trinity and met people in the jazz course there, and went to Tomorrow's Worries in particular. I think the way Gary and Janine embrace you into the jazz culture and the jazz world, really it touches you in a way, because the music is not just the music, it's the community around it as well. So I'd say that's how I got into the scene and music. I think maybe because it's presented in a more accessible way. I think it's always, back Gary Crosby and Steve Williamson's time, there's always been that jazz community of young people, and Courtney Pine and Jason Young, all of that. There's always been that young people playing jazz and listening to it. But I guess because things like streaming and Spotify and Instagram, social media has allowed more access to jazz music, it's easy to listen to it. But also there's platforms that are bringing back that dance aspect of the music. I think in the UK, jazz is often presented as sitting down with cocktails in tuxedos and going to particular establishments that are very expensive, where their cocktails are like £15, and that obviously cuts out a sector of the society. But now we've got more venues like Jazz Refresh, Total Refreshment Centre, etc., where it's standing. They make an emphasis of you're here to listen and you're here to dance, you can move to it, and it's sort of a free and safe space. So maybe that's why young people feel more inclined to go to these events. It's more of a safe space to enjoy the music, and the people on stage look like you. They're not necessarily dressed in the suits, they're just dressed like how you are. Yeah. I think it can still be quite hard, just because representation is everything. So obviously if you don't see women in those, playing big shows and doing all that thing, or even as a mentor position, then you are going to feel a little bit reserved. Same if you don't see like black people of colour in those positions, you're going to be like, where do I fit into this? So whilst institutions like Tomorrow's Warriors, and I keep going back to that, but it's very open arms kind of environment where they really do push women in jazz music. In general, I do feel there's still kind of a little bit of a, oh wow, you play drums or you play saxophone, that's really cool and interesting. And as long as there's that kind of reaction to what you play, that means that we're not there yet. But yeah, I would say that in London, or in the UK in particular, we're quite lucky in how receptive people are to women in jazz. But it would be good to get to a point where you're not a female composer or a female musician, just a musician. I would describe my music as an amalgamation of everything that I've grown up listening to and continue to listen to, just because I think improvised music, or anything that has improvisation in it, is a genre which is constantly shifting and flowing and growing and changing. So to sort of put a box around it doesn't work. Obviously, like, there's the influence of jazz, there's the influence of the classical stuff I've listened to, there's the influence of electronic music that I've listened to, and for me, like, I love to incorporate art and sci-fi and stuff like that into what I write as well. But to just try and put it in a box. In fact, a lot of the music and jazz in general, you can't put it in a box because it's constantly changing. All the stuff you listen to, like soul and hip hop and grime, that all comes and feeds through you as a musician and a composer into what you write. So maybe just like new music or like jazz inspired improvised music. Okay, overrated is that matcha latte that everyone is buying. Like, it's just, I think it tastes kind of foul. Like, it's nice as tea, you know, like proper like green tea, that's like good, but matcha latte is like trendy, like, yeah. Also quinoa, like it's nice, but like it's kind of, it doesn't have a nice flavour unless you know how to season it properly. So yeah, quinoa, I prefer couscous. Well, that was the overrated food. The underrated food, I think people underrated is dessert. Just any dessert, like cake. Like my friends know, especially in Kokoroko, I'm kind of obsessed with cake, and I think that's like how it makes you feel, how it can make you feel good. Like if I'm upset, I would go to a cake shop or a bakery and buy cake, and I think it's kind of maybe underrated how powerful dessert can be. Maybe Star Trek. Like, I really like Star Trek and sci-fi, the old series, but also like recently the new series, like on Netflix, is actually pretty good. You know what, some of Rihanna's old stuff, like some people are like, oh, you know, this kind of, but I think some of her old pop music, like the really like cheesy stuff, and the stuff where she's talking about like nasty stuff, like I love it. I think it's great. So I think Rihanna, because she's someone I was like, oh no, but then I listened and I was like, it's good, like kind of, yeah. Thank you very much for watching. You can follow me on Instagram at Cassie Kinoshi and SEED Ensemble as well, and on Twitter at Cassie Kinoshi and at SEED Ensemble. If you guys liked the video, like and subscribe to Everyone's a Critic, and let us know in the comments what you thought about the video and what you'd like to see next.